Hello and welcome to episode 2 of our Identity and Access series on identity and service providers for this week's Cloud Bytes TV episode. So last week we covered off at a high level the difference between authentication and authorization. This week, again, we're going to lay some more groundwork, quick overview of what an identity provider is and what a service provider is. So to understand what these two things are, let's take a typical walkthrough of how one might access an application. So let's say we've got an application that is doing some data visualization. So that data visualization is a service, and so this is our service provider. It's some application, some set of resources that is being hosted somewhere that we want to have access to. And I say we want to have access to because we're going to come and try and access that via our browser. Now, as we come and access that via our browser, it's going to say, okay, who are you? Are you allowed to come in and access this? And we're going to say, yes, I am this individual. So I would say, for example, I am Paul. And what it's going to do is our service provider is going to go away and it's going to try and retrieve an identity from us. And it's going to use my single identity that I've got from my identity provider. And so this is a service that provides identities. So think of Salesforce, think of Active Directory, think of Google, think of anything you can use that provides effectively single sign-on and provides the identity for you to use across applications. So I visit the service, I ask the service to give me access. The service says, okay, this person's saying that they're Paul, can they have access? They go over to the identity provider and the identity provider would say, yes, this is Paul. And the service would go, great, here you are, Paul, have a look at this visualization. And I'm then happy. So this is a fairly easy flow for us to understand. I'm sure all of us have used applications before and logged in using Google or Facebook or Twitter or Salesforce or any number of things. I have about, I pretty much, if I have the choice of logging in with Google on something, I do so. Okay. So this particular flow, the reason we've covered this is that it's a very, very easy one for us to understand. It's very popular, but it's also one of the two big types of login flows that we have for identity and service providers, and this is called the service provider initiated login. Okay, it's obviously called that because our service provider is initiating the login. You're trying to access the service provider, and it then says you must log in, and it goes to the identity provider to do so. Similarly, you can have the identity provider initiated login. So I go and access a resource that's listed through my identity provider. So I might log in to my Salesforce account, and I might go to my app manager, and it will list out all the different applications I can access. Okay, and does that in the app menu. And then I click on one, so it might be my visualization tool, and my identity provider then pushes me to that service and says, here's Paul, and he's trying to access that service. And the service provider knows that because it's coming from the identity provider, I am who I say I am, and I can access that. Okay, so those are the two big types of login flows that we've got for identity and service providers. There's loads of different permutations we'll go through later on around different flows for SAML and OAuth and so on and so forth. But this is really high level. This is just base work for us to cover here. Okay, so that we know the difference between a service provider and an identity provider and which one's playing which. So in summary, just to wrap this one up, a service provider, application, host of resources, something that's providing a service, unsurprisingly. So, key thing with a service provider, it does not manage access and does not manage the identity of the users, okay? It just provides the service and it uses our identity provider to get that identity. And the reason it can use an identity provider is it's something that we've told it to trust. If you ever want to set up single sign-on and to have a separate identity provider for a service, it will ask you to set up and it will say that this is one that you've agreed to trust, or it agrees to trust in the case of a consumer application. And the identity provider, it manages the identity for normally a range of applications. So taking Salesforce, again, you can use Salesforce as a single sign-on tool for any different applications. So Workday is a popular one, SAP, Google Mail, all these different things. And similarly, you can use your Google Mail address to log into Salesforce, to log into something like Lucidchart and a bunch of other tools as well. So broad, high-level overview of what identity and service providers are, how they interplay and how they work. Again, we've covered off more of the base ground. So next week, we're going to get into user provisioning, which is a really important topic. I'm going to start talking about user provisioning. I'm going to do it via the API. So why we might do it via the API, when we're going to do that, and how that looks. Hopefully you found this video interesting and informational and useful. If you have, hit like below. Also hit subscribe if you want to get the videos as they come out. So say next week we're covering a very important topic on the user provisioning via the API. If you have any comments, questions, please leave them below. And yeah, look forward to speaking to you next week. Thank you very much and speak soon.